Right, Shmuel Bet. Now, I'm going to start with our homework that we could remember from last week. Can't start with the one we couldn't remember because we couldn't remember it. But the one we could remember it was David asks a question. Why is chapter 6 and some of chapter 7 the Haftarah for Parashat Shemini? And David's exact words were, because I just listened to them half an hour or so ago, 3/4 of an hour ago, I can understand why chapter 6 is the Haftarah for Shemini, but why chapter 7? That was our homework. I'm going to ask you first, David. What have you come up with?
I think specifically the inclusion of
Hang on a sec. Hang on a
Natan.
sec. Hang on a sec. Before you give us an answer, we need the background. We need
Okay.
the background. Tell us what Parashat Shemini is about. We know what chapter 6 and 7 are about here because we've just been in the middle of learning it. So tell us about the Parashat Shemini and how chapter 6 connects to it, and then your thoughts on chapter 7. So let's go slowly. You know, we don't
Okay.
like to rush these things.
The Parashat Shemini deals with the consecration of the Mishkan on either the 1st of Nisan or the 8th of Nisan. There's a dispute about that. And amidst the great rejoicing, just as we saw in Shmuel Bet, there's tragedy as well with Nadav and Avihu struck down for reasons that we're not 100% sure of, but most likely was that they didn't show reverence for either the occasion or the place. So there you've got the parallel with what happened to Nadav and Avihu and what happened to Uzziah.
Okay, very good. So you'll remember, everyone, that chapter 6 tells us the tragic story of Uzzah, who touched the Aron Kodesh. Either he stumbled or it stumbled, whatever the reason is. There's another parallel, isn't it, David? We're not quite sure why Uzzah did it, was punished, but he was punished and struck down. So that's a very clear and obvious, to quote VAR, clear and obvious comparison. Now, your idea as to chapter 7, why chapter 7? That was your original question, is why did the Haftarah go into chapter 7? Why didn't it just stop at the end of chapter 6? Chapter 7, of course, is about David wanting to build the temple and not being allowed to do so.
Okay, so my idea was it focuses on Natan and Natan's two prophecies. The first, which was not given al pi Hashem, this was his own view, and he's rebuked for this. And then second time
Let's
round,
just tell the listeners what that prophecy was. What that he said off his own bat. What did he say off his own bat?
Yeah, sure, David. You go ahead and build the Bet HaMikdash.
Correct. And then later on, HaKadosh Baruch Hu came to him and said, carry on.
No, it's not the right time. And then we had the whole discussion this year last week, whether it was the timing, whether it was the blood on David's hands, or whether it was the time wasn't a secure time to build the Bet HaMikdash. So maybe that can be compared two possible things. Thinking before one act, which was one of the possible problems with Nadav and Avihu. Yes, they thought they were being extra frum, but they hadn't consulted Hashem first. They went into this, whatever they did wrong on Yom HaShmini, with the best of intentions, but they should have asked first. They should have asked permission first. However, they don't. Natan doesn't appear to suffer the same tragic consequences as Nadav and Avihu. Possibly another connection is Aharon's reaction to the death of his two sons. Vayidom Aharon, he kept quiet. And first time round, maybe that's what Natan should have done when he's first given this request by David. And then he quite rightly responds by asking Hashem, what is the correct response to the events that have happened in chapter 6?
Okay. I like both of those. I've written them down in my Chidushay Poleg thing, and we'll see if we can find any corroboration for that. If not, it goes in. So Vayidom Aaron, perhaps that's what Natan should have done in the first place.
Yeah.
Without so it's really connected to the first thing, isn't it? Really, he didn't ask Hashem, and he did jump in without thinking too much. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Great. Anybody else got any suggestions as to why chapter 7 comes along as the Haftarah for Shemini? Anybody? I'll tell you what I thought. Yeah, go on, Hannah.
The only thing I can think of is the parallel between the Mishkan and wanting to build the Bet HaMikdash. Yeah, that both of them are home for Hashem to reside within us. And so they put that in also.
Yeah,
because
and that was what I thought as well. I thought that there was, similar to what Hannah has just said, I thought when I looked at it carefully, I thought that there was a sort of historical line being drawn here between the inauguration of the Mishkan, which is what Shemini is all about. It's right, the Mishkan is now ready for use. And that is what David wanted. David wanted to have a Bet Mikdash ready for use. And in effect, what he was being told is, as we started to talk about last time, and we'll carry on in a minute, the timing isn't right. But the important thing, and this is where I think the reason, if I'm not mistaken, the Haftarah ends at verse 7 of chapter 7. Is that right, David? Can you just confirm that?
There's a difference between the Sephardim and Ashkenazim on this.
Oh, well, that's good. There's always difference between,
Sephardi and Ashkenazi.
The Sephardim go on until verse 17.
Good. Okay, I've got that. Right. Where do the Ashkenazim stop? I think
the
it's
Ashkenazim stop. Oh, that's interesting. In this ticket I've got, it said it's the Ashkenazim that stop at verse 17. The Sephardim stop not even at the end of chapter 6.
Great. In that case, and that makes it even better because I'm with the Ashkenazim on this. Right. So it stops at verse 17. Okay. Now, verse 17 is the end of Natan's prophecy, which we're going to go into in some detail today, actually. So it's good that we've started with this. Now, if you look carefully, you haven't got it on the screen yet, have you? Let me put it on the screen for you. There we go. Should have it in a sec. There you go. Right. So if we look at chapter 7 that we're in, the Hashem's discussion, if you like, with Natan, telling him what to say, starts at verse 5 and goes through to verse 17. The first part is, no, David, you won't do it. And the second part is, but, and this is, by the way, I meant to say this last week, but I'll say it now because it's just popped into my head. This is a brilliant example of very modern psychology. That when you tell somebody, no, they can't do something, always give them something that they can do. right? And we were always, this is one of the things that when I was involved in running a GP practice, which thank God I am no longer involved in running a GP practice. But when I was, and I used to train the receptionists, when we weren't able to do whatever it was that the unreasonable patient was requesting, like an appointment, God forbid, and they couldn't accommodate them, we always taught them to say, not to say no and then wait for the reaction, but to say, I'm afraid that's not available. However, but I can offer you X, Y, Z. And that's what Natan, or that's what Hashem through Natan has said to David. No, David, you will not build this temple, which must have been incredibly disappointing for him. However, your son will do so. And not only that, he gets a great bracha about his son and about his descendants, which we'll come into in a minute. So what's going on here is that up to verse 17, Hashem is saying to David, it's not for you to do it, but your son will do it, and there'll be great brachot coming on from here. And I think the fact that the Ashkenazim finish at 17 tells us exactly why chapter 7 is included in the Haftarah, because Shemini was about the culmination of a major task to build the Mishkan. The culmination was that the Mishkan is now fit for use, and it's now unveiled as the house of God, as it were. Must have been, if you just think about it for a second, can you imagine how what an amazing event that must have been, the inauguration of the Mishkan, and proportionately even greater event, the inauguration of Shlomo's temple, Chanukat Habayit there. And I think that's the connection. I think the connection is, you could argue that a better connection would be the actual Chanukat Habayit, the description of the Chanukat Habayit of Shlomo. But I think that this is more subtle. And because of chapter 6, and this chapter 7 follows on from it, despite the fact that what we said last week, that it may not be in chronological order, it is there in thematic order. And I think it was a brilliant choice for Haftarah, because we've got the connections with Nadav and Avihu and Uzzah, as David has said. We've got the connections with Natan, as David has said. And we've got the connection, the historical line being drawn between the inauguration of the Mishkan and the promise of the Bet HaMikdash. And if you like, verse 16 particularly, I think, is a very important verse. Let's just have a look at that now. Shem says to David, and your house and your kingdom shall be confirmed forever before you, and your throne shall be established forever. We're going to look at that in some detail. But that's a massive bracha to David, in the same way as the Mishkan was a great bracha. So, yeah, I think we've answered that rather nicely, really. Any other ideas, David?
Look, I wanted to throw in something from yesterday's Haftarah as well, to do with the shir last week, which, having learned that the shir last week and the Haftarah from yesterday, we would have learned several months ago, brings into a completely different light.
Yes,
the idea of dwelling securely in the land, the time of David HaMelech, it wasn't possible. By the time his son takes the throne, they've got that security. Now, did we assume last week that at the time of Shlomo was the first time that we experienced that security in our own land? And if so, that's contradicted by what we read yesterday.
Okay. Well, this may. I think the answer is no. We didn't assume that it was the first time, and I think that fits, because we have, and we discussed this in great detail last week, we have two separate sets of reasons. I won't say two reasons, because the first reason actually is split into three, why David wasn't allowed to build the temple. In our chapter, we have three things that we have to consider as to why David is not allowed to build the temple. But in Divrei Hayamim, we have the more well-known reason of David had innocent blood on his hands. We discussed this in great detail last week, right? Yeah. Yep. So the argument is this, David, that even if David did not have blood on his hands, right at this time, when he asked to do it, which, if you take this chapter to be in chronological order and not, as the Radak says, out of chronological order, then this is very early on in his kingship, where the timing was not right.
Just take a look at Shmuel Aleph, chapter 11, verse 11. Obviously, we've studied it, but I've never thought of it until I listened to the Haftarah yesterday.
There we go. Verse 11. Vayhi mimocharat, and it was on the next day, Vayasam Shaul et ha'am shlosha rashim vayavo b'toch ha'machaneh ba'ashmor et ha'boker.
No. Sorry. Chapter 11, verse 11.
Yeah, that's what I'm reading.
Vayishlach Hashem et Yerubbaal v'et Bedan.
Not according to this. Shmuel Aleph, chapter 11, verse 11.
Chapter 12, sorry.
Chapter 12. Okay, let's go to chapter 12, verse 11. Yes. Vayishlach Hashem et Yerubbaal v'et Bedan v'et Yiftach v'et Shmuel v'yatzel etchem miyad oivechem misaviv v'teshvu betach.
And what's the context of this story?
This is the story about
Shaul being appointed king.
Shaul being appointed king, that's right. So Hashem sends Yerubbaal. Who was Yerubbaal? We've learnt this together years ago. Who was Yerubbaal, everyone? Yerubbaal was another name for... Barbara, you're muted. I think you got it right. Gidon, correct. Well done.
I didn't know it. I have to tell you, I didn't know it. I read it here in the...
Okay, well done. And well done for admitting that you cheated. Not cheating, really. Only
used my initiative.
Yes, very good. Excellent.
Didn't use ChatGPT.
I did not. I used...
Use the Chumash. Very good. Okay.
With the Rashi.
Yeah, Yerubbaal was Gidon, yes. Ve'et Bedan, another one of
Shimon.
It was Bedan?
Shimon, it said. No, Shimshon.
Shimshon, not Shimon, Shimshon,
No,
yeah.
My
another
Rashi
name for Shimshon.
so
And Yiftach, who was Yiftach?
A general.
Yeah, he was he was a judge, but he was remember Yiftach? He was the one that made
sacrifice his daughter, or didn't?
Yes, he made the ridiculous vow and about his daughter. So Va'et Shmuel and Shmuel Vayatzel etchem. The point that David's making is an end part of the pasuk, but I couldn't go over it without saying who these people were. You know me, I can't possibly say anything without being analytic on it. Vayatzel etchem miyad ovechem. And he saved you from the hand of your enemies, misaviv, from all around. Vateshvu betach, and you dwelt in safety. So David's point is, well, if that was the point, that we had to dwell in safety before Hashem would allow the building of the temple, why wasn't it built at the time of Yerubbaal or Shimshon or Yiftach? And the answer is?
But they were still fighting.
Well, it's not what it says.
No, but it's like, unfortunately, it's kind of a bit like us today. We're sort of quite secure in the land, but we keep fighting all the time.
Well,
And we're not.
history tells us you're right, that we did have battle after battle after battle after those people. So maybe that is the answer. I've got what I think is a much better answer, but I mean, I want to hear your answers first before I tell you what I think. Go on, David. What do you think?
No. Also crucial is the word in the Haftarah, misaviv. Okay, from misaviv v'shaftem betach in Re'eh.
Yeah. I mean, all the wording seems to fit that this could have been a time to build the Bet HaMikdash. Now, who has been learning Sanhedrin with us? David and Avril and Hannah. Okay, now put your Sanhedrin hat on for a second and tell me why the Bet HaMikdash was not built in the time of Yerubbaal, Bedan, or Yiftach, or even Shmuel.
Well, there were the three mitzvot: the Melech, defeating Amalek, and security.
Correct, and building the temple.
Yeah.
Right, and what did we learn in Sanhedrin? That there was a special order for it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And the order was you had to have a king first.
And that's what's happening now. They're appointing a king.
Yes, exactly. But they haven't got one yet. And when they did appoint a king, they were not Shavtem Betach.
Well, but he'd been anointed by Shmuel already, and this was the public coronation of Shaul.
But but he's not solid in his kingship, right? In the same way as we've got with David. So Yerubbaal, Bedan, and Yiftach, we've got a great answer. We've got the answer from the Gemara. Gemara tells us you have to have a king first. Here now, you've got a king, but I mean, it was a very shaky business, wasn't it? First of all, Shaul was as nervous as anything. He ran off and didn't want to come out at first. Secondly, he didn't exactly cover himself with glory throughout his kingship, and he was fighting the Plishtim the whole time. And we can't say. So I think what Hannah's saying is right in a way. There might have been Shavtem Betach intermittently, a bit like today. After 1967, we had a bit of a lull, didn't we? Didn't last long. 73 came along and bang. And we're used to that, unfortunately, in modern Jewish history.
Israel.
And in fact, you could argue. I'm not going to get into this now. No, I'm not even going to say it because it will just open a whole discussion where I don't want to go. But
can I have a red herring?
Go on.
Abraham was punished for having a treaty with one of the neighboring nations. Okay? So we learn from that we're not supposed to have treaties with the neighboring nations. So how are we supposed to live in peace with them?
Where is Abraham punished for that?
Oh, now I've got to go find a source. But it's something that I learned in a shiur, that he was punished for having a peace treaty.
I understood that he was punished for asking advice from Mamre, as it were, about bris milah. Could be wrong, but I don't recall learning he was punished for making peace treaties. In fact, the Torah tells us that apart from the Shivat Ha'amin, we are meant to approach our enemies with a peace treaty. If they accept a peace treaty, all well and good. I mean, that's mefurash in the Torah. What you're saying, Hannah, may well be true. I'm certainly not questioning what you're saying. Well, I am, because I don't know it, but I'm sure you'll find the source for it. But it's not mefurash in the Torah, and the Torah in mefurash says that we have to approach our neighbors, who are not those 7 nations, with a proposal for peace before we attack them. So So I think
Okay.
we've got precedent for that. I think we've got precedent for approaching with a peace treaty.
But
Okay,
can I just say something just on the point we were talking before? I asked
Yes.
my grandkids who learn loads why he wasn't allowed to build the base of Mikdash, and all my kids all said unanimously because it would have lasted forever. And if it wasn't destroyed, then we would have been destroyed. So it was to save the Jewish people. That was the reason they'd all learned.
Okay, so that was what Hannah said last week.
Yeah, that
yeah.
was what they were learning, not the other two reasons. They all knew the other two reasons, but that was what was emphasized.
Yeah, well, that of course would fit your kids in Haredi yeshivas.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So no, I'm not being facetious. That's the philosophy.
It's the midrash.
Yeah, that's the midrash that Hannah quoted last week, and that's the philosophy that you would expect.
Yes, I get that. Yeah.
Bochurim in that environment to be had. And
just as a rider to that, I wasn't going to bring it up, but if we're already talking about this, then I was also taught that the reason that the Kotel Maravi is standing and it's the Western Wall is that David, despite everything, built the Western Wall. I don't know where it's written. I'll see if I can find a source for that. But I was taught that the same as Avril's grandchildren were taught.
I would like to see a source for that, because my understanding is that the first temple was completely razed to the ground, and in fact there wasn't even a wall there at that time. But again, I stand ready to be corrected on that. But you'll understand, being me, who's somebody who doesn't take most of the midrashim literally. I take the most of the midrashim allegorically and try and learn something from them. You'll excuse me if I don't accept that as even if it's there in the midrash, I don't accept it as a literal thing. I think it's something that's trying to tell us a lesson, whatever that is. Yes, Barbara.
I'm going to conduct an experiment and ask my grandchildren, who are in, I would say, left of Haredi yeshivot, i.e. probably Chardal, what their opinion is, and I'll come back to.
And I will ask my grandchildren, who are in a Dati Leumi style high school, they're not in yeshiva yet, and who are taught by the way, who are taught by a most amazing, wonderful teacher called Dvora Posner in Perth. Absolutely phenomenal. My son Dan, who's the Rav there, as you know, says he absolutely hates it when she comes to his shiurim, because he's like dead nervous, because she's so brilliant, and she's a brilliant teacher as well. I am going to ask my grandchildren, who have been taught by her, and she's very much in the Dati Leumi mold. This is a brilliant experiment. We should write the results of this up and publish it. I don't wonder whether Mishpacha, no, probably Mishpacha probably won't want it. But maybe I can feel a good Jerusalem Post article coming on here. Right, Barbara, I want to know the results of your experiment, and I will report back next week on.
Paul, my husband's complaining at me for a change. What did you say? Oh, all right, we'll discuss it later.
Yeah, don't have a domestic over
God
it.
forbid. God forbid.
Right. So, where are we up to now? We're still in this.
Before you go on, as far as you're being very rational about the midrashim, shivim panim leTorah. It's
Wonderful.
all there for all of us.
100%. 100%. No question about that. I have no problem with anybody who disagrees with my approach to life. If it does it for you, that's absolutely fine. Right. So let's go back to the question here. Let's go back to Shmuel Bet Chapter 7, which I've got on the screen again, just to finish the answer to our question that David set us last week. I think the connection between Shemini And chapter 7 is this historical connection between the Mishkan and the Bet Mikdash, and specifically the bit that we won't get to it this week now, but this specifically the bracha that David gets from Hashem, if you like, as a sort of a consolation prize, that no but idea. No, you can't build the Bet Mikdash, but I'm going to give you something which is, equally good or even better. And that is that your house and your kingdom will last forever. And that's going to be my homework for you for this week. But I'm not going to say it now, because if I say it now, I'll have to go back and listen to the whole shir again because we'll forget it in the next 15 minutes. So I will give you the homework just before the end of the shir. So I only have to listen to the last 5 minutes. Right. Now then, let's go back and talk about this whole idea in this chapter. This chapter is a fascinating chapter when you scrape the surface. On the surface, it's David says, I want to build the Beit HaMikdash. Natan says, great idea. And then Hashem says, no, it isn't. Go and tell him he can't do it. His son is going to do it. And that's it. Very nice. End of story. But underneath all of this, there is so much more than that. David has already raised the issue of Natan. How come Natan didn't ask Hashem and took it upon himself? And we need to go into this speech of Hashem through Natan and break it down into its 3 components and discuss all of those components together. So I think we'll do that first, and then we'll come to the question as to why Natan sort of got it wrong, if you like. So we've got this prophecy of Hashem, of David of Natan coming from Hashem. Verse 5, go and say to my servant David, so says Hashem, shall you build me a house for my dwelling? For I have not dwelt in a house from the day I brought up the children of Israel out of Egypt to this day, but I've walked a tent of tabernacle. So the first thing is, and then verse 7 as well, I never said, why did you not build me a house of cedar? So the first thing is, what? I don't need a house. I'm quite satisfied with what I've got. Thank you very much, with the Mishkan. That's the first part of the prophecy, right? Second part is verse 8. Now, kotom alavdi David. Now you shall say to my servant David, and remember, we stressed this word avdi to tell us that Hashem is not chastising David here. He's calling him avdi, my servant, which is a term of endearment. So shall you say to my servant David, Kom Hashem tzvakot, ani lakachtich min hanaveh. I've taken you from being in the sheepcote. Where's the sheepcote? You were just a little shepherd there, messing around with sheep, that's all. And I took you from there, and I made you into a Nagid al-Ami. I made you a leader. A leader. What's the root of the word Nagid?
Ninhag or something, to like drive and
Lahagid is to tell, isn't it?
Yeah, Barbara's correct. It's from lahagid, to tell. Nagid, literally, if you were to use the word Nagid, it means we will tell. Nagid, future tense, we will tell. So a Nagid, alami, is somebody who tells the people what to do. In other words, a leader. So I've taken you from being a shepherd to be the leader, and not just a leader over any old folk. It doesn't just say Nagid al Yisrael. What does it say? Al Ami al Yisrael. My people. So he's really building, Hashem is building David up. David is described as Eved Hashem. He's described as the leader, not only the leader of Israel, but the leader of my people, Israel. This is a really, really important job you've got there, right? And I have been with you, wherever you've gone, and I've destroyed your enemies before you. V'asita lecha shem gadol, and I've made you into a great name. Kashem agdolim asher ba'aretz. You are the spitz. I have made you into a top guy. Okay? So, and then he says, "V'samti makom la'ami liYisrael u'natati v'shachein tachtav v'lo yirgaz od." And it's all going to be great. I'll gate a place for my people. I'll make them there. I'll plant them there. They will not be disturbed anymore. Nobody will be, see that word yirgaz? V'lo yirgaz od. They will not be, what's the root of that word?
Ragaz, Reish Gimel Zion. I don't know
Yes, what does it mean?
No idea.
Yes, you do. What's the root of that word? Ivor, you also know the root of that word.
Bloggers.
Yes, broigas. Broigas. What does broigas mean? Roiges, with a roiges. What's roiges? Trouble, sorrows, right? Aggravation. If you've got a broiges with somebody, it means you disagree with them. So v'lo yirgazu od, people will not give you sorrows. V'lo yosifu b'nei avla, and the wicked folk will not le'anoto, will not afflict you. There's that lechem oni, okay? On le'anoto, to afflict you. The wicked people will not afflict you, kasher berishona, as they did at the beginning. Okay? And then he goes on to say that it won't be you that does it. So the second part is, I've done enough for you. Don't chap more than you need to, right? You don't need to be the one that makes the temple. I've already done amazing stuff for you, right? You don't have to have the temple as well. That'll be for somebody else. That's for your son. So that's the second part. And the third part starts in verse 12. Okay? Ki yimla'u yamecha, when your days are up, v'shachavta et avotecha, and you lay with your fathers, v'hakimoti et zaracha acharecha asher yetzei mimecha, and I will establish your seed after you, that which has come from your loins, v'hachinoti et mamlachto, and I will establish his kingdom. Lahachin, hachinoti et mamlachto. It's different to hakimoti. The first part of this bracha is hakimoti. What's the difference between hakimoti and hachinoti? Hakimoti, I will raise up your seed, hachinoti, and I will, I don't know, mechin. What's it mean?
Mechin is to prepare, isn't it?
Mechin is to prepare, yes, that's true. But there is another word that you know, which is the root of that. Anybody a sportsman here? If you wanted to be, oh yes, Ivor, where would you do sport round here? If you wanted to do sport, where would you do sport round here? Where is Israel's national sports place? Just down the road from here.
Wingate.
Wingate. And what is Wingate's full name?
Machon.
Machon Wingate. Okay. If you didn't get that, I was going to say any scientists here. Where would you go for science to be a scientist? You'd go to Machon Weizmann. What does Machon mean?
Institution.
Yeah.
An institution. What is an institution? Something which is, solid. You don't call something an institution that you've just, we use that expression in English, don't we? Oh, it's an institution, right? To have strawberries and cream at Wimbledon next week. Is it next week? I think it is, isn't it?
Today
it starts, is it? Okay. There you go. It shows you what I know. So strawberries and cream at Wimbledon is an institution. In other words, it's something which is established for generations. That's the mechina. This is the implication of the word hachinoti. I will establish it. That's the English translation on our screen. I will establish it, meaning I will establish it and keep it going for generations. That's the difference between hakimoti is I'll establish it to start with. I'll raise it up, right? Hakamat Medinat Yisrael was in 1948, right? It was not established as it were, as a mechina, as a machon, when it was first established, because, you know, Al Pi Teva could have lasted a week before it was destroyed at the time it was established. So hakama means to establish something in the first place. V'hachinoti means I will deepen its establishment. Let's put it that way. So what's he telling you here is the beginning of what he then goes on to say in verse 13. Hu yivneh bayit lishmi. He, in other words, your son, who he's not told him who it is yet, but your son, because it could have been a load of sons came out of his loins, did they not? All sorts of folk, Avshalom and all sorts of folk. We don't know it's Shlomo yet, but Hu yivneh bayit lishmi, he will build a house for my name. V'chonanti, same word, can you see? Chonanti, same word as v'hachinoti. V'chonanti et kisei mamlachto ad olam. I will fix, establish, deepen his kingdom ad olam, forever, forever. Carry on. Carry on. Verse 40. Ani eyeh lo la'av. I will be for him as a father. Who would not want to hear these words about your son from HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself? HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I will be to your son like a father. Wow. You know, that is the most wonderful bracha. V'hu yiyeh li lebein. And he will be to me as a son. Asher b'ha'avoto v'hochachtiv b'shevet. And you should know, like a son, right? Like a son, if he goes off the derech, I'll chastise him. V'hochachtiv. Where have you got that word in the Torah? V'hochachtiv. Tochacha, yes, that's actually not in the Torah. We call it the tochacha. But yes, you're right. We have two tochachas. Where are they? Yeah, you know, where are they? Where are the two tochachas, since you mentioned them? One is, we just said a few weeks ago. B'chukotai.
After the golden calf?
Yeah, b'chukotai. Yeah. B'chukotai. And where's the second one? Devarim, yes, good, Paul. Could you be a little bit more specific?
No.
Ivor, where's the second tochacha? No? David, tell us.
Kitavo.
Kitavo, yes, kitavo. Okay, you're right, Barbara, the tochacha, but where in the Torah there is a specific mitzvah that uses that word? In fact, it uses it twice. Hochiach, tochiach et amitecha. You shall surely rebuke your fellow. In other words, you see somebody doing something wrong, you have to tell him what's right. So that's the same word here. I will tell him what's right. I'll chastise him. It says here, I'll chasten him. B'shevet anashim, uvenig'ei b'nei adam. And in other words, if he goes off the derech, this boy of yours, who's going to be like my own son, I'll tell him off. This is the way I would tell my own son off, says God. And he'll have tzoros. People will give him tzoros. I will use men, and b'shevet anashim. By the way, some of the Mefarshim describe our enemies in exactly that way. Nebuchadnezzar was described as the rod of Hashem. In other words, Nebuchadnezzar was used and we have the same expression in English, don't we? We use something as a stick to beat him with. Yeah, shevet. It's a stick. So I will use human beings as a stick to beat him if he goes off the derech. Now, that's not a very nice prophecy, is it? But it is, because before he says, I'm going to tell him off and chastise him with a stick if he goes off the derech, he said, but he's a son to me. You tell your son off, what's that called? Tough love, right? Tough love.
Well, who did he use the stick against Shlomo when he went off the derrick?
Good question. And I don't think he's specifically talking about Shlomo here, because the verse 13 says, I'll establish his throne and his kingdom forever. So I think it's a good question. I don't know. Shlomo seemed to have quite an easy run, didn't he, really? So that's a fair question. But I think if you look at verse 13 and 14 together, I think the implication is that David's kingdom, his descendants, will be treated in that way. And then he goes on to say, don't worry. Yes, I'll chastise him, but don't worry. Verse 16. Verse 15, sorry. V'chasdei lo yasur mimeni. V'chasdi lo yasur mimeni. My kindness, my mercy will not depart from him. Kasher hasiroti mi al Shaul. As I took it away from Shaul, meaning I'll never take away the kingdom from the house of David like I did take it away from Shaul. Okay, because originally the house of Shaul was meant to carry on through Jonathan and through there. And it was taken away from him after the Agag business. So I won't do that to you, he says. And that's a very important promise, because David in his own lifetime has seen the kingdom taken away from one dynasty and given to another. So this is a very important promise to David. And then, in case you're not sure of what I'm talking about, David, verse 16, V'ne'eman beitcha u'mamlachtecha ad olam lefanecha. Your house and your kingdom will be ne'eman, will be faithful forever in front of you. Kisacha yiyeh nachon. Your throne will be nachon. What does nachon mean?
Correct.
Correct.
True.
What
is the root of the word nachon?
Ken.
Ken. Yes, it is. It is Ken. But what else is the root of that word? We've had it twice already. V'hachinoti. V'chonanti. Do you think nachon might be connected with that? I think it is. Look at the translation in the English. Your throne shall be established forever. Yiyeh nachon. It will be like a machon. It'll be Machon Weizmann, it'll be Machon Wingate, it'll be Machon, whatever you want, right? It'll be forever. This is a massive bracha that David is getting. Now, we're at the end of time for the shiur, so I can now give you my homework that I'm going to ask you. Two things I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you, number one, it's not true. David's kingdom did not last forever. We don't have a Davidic king today. We didn't have a Davidic king after the destruction of the first temple. So how can Tanakh tell us ad olam when it's not true? That's question number one. And the second question I want to ask you is this, a little bit more subtle, this second question. The second question for your homework to consider is, this is a massive, massive bracha given to David. Really, really important. But it's sort of snuck in in a prophecy of Natan, where the main function of the prophecy is to tell him not to make that he's not going to be the one that makes the Beit HaMikdash. It's the but. It's the no, you can't. But seems to me that this is a very, very important prophecy. This second part of or third part of Natan's prophecy here. Surely it needed bigger billing than being a sort of consolation prize for not being able to build the temple. Now, those are the two questions, and I can see Barbara writing them down, which is very wise, because otherwise, within an hour on past form, we'll all have forgotten what they were. So, two questions. Number one, how come we've got a prophecy here that appears not to have been fulfilled? And secondly, why was this prophecy not given the billing that it seems to deserve? I'll leave those questions pending. In the meantime, any comments about today's, well, we didn't do much of a shiur. We had an interesting discussion, but any comments? Okay, in that case, I shall wish you a Shavua Tov. And those of you who are going to join us tomorrow night, Be'ezrat Hashem, we will have the Tefillah Shiur, but it may be a little bit later because of the Raymond Shiva House. So it may be 8:30 or just after.
Tomorrow night I've got a wedding in Jerusalem.
Well,
Altov.
So